Today, the Justice Department is announcing significant enforcement actions against the largest, most violent, and most prolific fentanyl trafficking operation in the world.
We announced that the Department of Justice would pursue the total elimination of cartels and transnational criminal organizations. Thanks to President Trump, many of these groups, many of these gangs are now classified as foreign terrorist organizations because they pose an extreme threat to not only our country, but to our world.
5:42 a.m., Miami, Florida. Before sunrise, black FBI and DEA vehicles quietly entered a wealthy waterfront neighborhood near Biscayne Bay. Their target was a $14 million mansion hidden behind tall iron gates and palm trees. For 9 months, federal agents had been watching the man who lived there, Luis El Toro Mendoza, a suspected coordinator for a powerful Mexican drug cartel. Wiretaps suggested the mansion was more than a luxury home. Investigators believed it was a key hub in a massive pipeline moving cocaine and fentanyl into the United States. At 5:47 a.m., the signal came. A steel battering ram smashed the front door. Agents stormed inside, clearing rooms with trained precision. Mendoza was found in the master bedroom reaching for a pistol, but within seconds he was on the floor in handcuffs. Then the search began. Agents discovered 1.8 tons of cocaine and over 420 kilograms of fentanyl, enough to produce more than 200 million lethal doses. Hidden throughout the mansion was also $53 million in cash. At first, it looked like one of Miami's biggest drug busts. But inside Mendoza's private office, agents were about to uncover something far more shocking. If this raid surprised you, type yes in the comments. As the search of the mansion continued, DEA agents moved carefully through each room, documenting evidence. By this point, the drug seizure alone was already massive. But inside Mendoza's private office, Special Agent Victor Reyes had spent 15 years investigating cartel operations. But something about this mansion felt wrong. When he compared the building layout to the property records, his instincts told him there was space missing. The numbers didn't match. According to the property records, the mansion measured over 12,000 square feet. But when Reyes compared the outside structure with the inside layout, the office appeared nearly 15 feet shorter than it should have been. There was empty space somewhere behind the wall. Reyes walked slowly along a tall wooden bookshelf that covered the back of the office. One section felt slightly loose. When he pushed it, the entire shelf shifted. Behind it was a hidden steel door. Agents forced it open. Inside was a room that looked nothing like a cartel hideout. Instead, it resembled a law enforcement command center. 3 large monitors displayed live surveillance feeds pointed at the entrances of Miami-Dade Police Headquarters, the Miami Police Department main station, and the county sheriff's office. On a table sat professional radio scanners tuned directly to police communication frequencies. Pinned to one wall was a large city map of Miami marked with patrol routes, notes, and coded symbols. And on the desk, lying in plain sight, was a thick leather ledger. Across the first page were 4 chilling words: monthly protection payroll. At that moment, agents realized they were no longer looking at just a drug operation. Something far more disturbing was about to be uncovered. Comment below. What shocked you more, the hidden room or the police surveillance monitors? Agent Reyes opened the leather ledger carefully, wearing latex gloves. The first page was neatly organized, almost like a business report. At the very top was a single name, Sheriff Daniel Vargas, $500,000 per month. Below that were 18 more entries, each listing a police officer's badge number, first name, and payment amount. The numbers were staggering. Some officers were receiving $40,000 a month. Others were paid as much as $120,000 every month just to protect the cartel's operations. At the bottom of the page, a total was written clearly: $4.7 million in monthly payments. The ledger went back 5 full years. Page after page showed the same pattern: payments delivered, warnings sent, raids avoided. By the time agents finished counting, the number was almost unbelievable. The cartel had spent more than $280 million bribing law enforcement in Miami. But the ledger revealed something even more disturbing. Next to several payments were short notes written in careful handwriting: raid delayed, evidence removed, route safe tonight. These officers weren't just taking money. They were actively helping a drug pipeline investigators now estimated was worth $2.9 billion. And the deeper agents looked, the worse the betrayal appeared to be. Police taking cartel money. Type corruption if you believe this betrayal is unforgivable. Within hours, the mansion was secured as a federal crime scene. What began as a DEA drug raid quickly turned into a full FBI corruption investigation. Federal agents knew they could not trust anyone inside the local departments. The evidence suggested the cartel had people inside the very agencies meant to stop them, so the FBI worked quietly and in total secrecy. Over the next several weeks, agents studied the ledger, encrypted phones, and financial records recovered from the mansion. The pattern that emerged was deeply disturbing. The corrupt officers had helped the cartel avoid at least 27 major drug raids. When drugs or money were seized and stored as evidence, certain officers with access to the evidence room would make items disappear. In 14 major trafficking cases, key evidence was mysteriously lost, forcing prosecutors to drop charges. But the most shocking discovery involved witnesses. Investigators found records showing that several cooperating witnesses had their home addresses leaked shortly after speaking with police. Within weeks, 6 of those witnesses were murdered. For FBI agents, the conclusion was unavoidable. This was not just corruption, it was a criminal network operating from inside law enforcement itself. By the time the FBI finished reviewing the evidence from the mansion, the scale of the corruption was undeniable. The cartel had not only bribed officers, they had built an entire protection system inside law enforcement. Federal prosecutors approved a massive arrest operation. The plan was simple, but extremely risky. If even one corrupt officer learned about the investigation, the entire network could disappear overnight. So the FBI prepared a coordinated strike. The operation was given a name, Operation Iron Badge. Before dawn on June 18th, more than 120 federal agents gathered quietly at staging points across Miami-Dade County. Tactical teams from the FBI and DEA reviewed final instructions. Each team had one target. The list included Sheriff Daniel Vargas and 18 police officers, 19 suspects in total. At exactly 6 a.m., the order was given. Across the county, FBI teams moved simultaneously. At a quiet waterfront home in Key Biscayne, agents surrounded the residence of Sheriff Vargas. As the garage door opened and Vargas stepped outside, he was met by armed federal agents. FBI, don't move. The sheriff froze. Within seconds, he was in handcuffs. Inside his home, agents discovered $4.1 million in cash, hidden inside storage boxes in the garage. Nearby were encrypted phones containing months of communication with cartel contacts. But across Miami, not every arrest went smoothly. In another neighborhood, FBI agents knocked on the door of a police officer suspected of taking cartel payments. When the door opened and the officer saw federal agents, he slammed it shut and ran toward the back of the house. Agents forced their way inside. The officer jumped a backyard fence and sprinted through a narrow alley, trying to escape. 2 agents chased him across yards and between parked cars before tackling him 2 blocks away. At another location, investigators found an officer desperately trying to destroy his phone, smashing it against a kitchen counter. Agents restrained him before the device could be completely destroyed. Across Miami-Dade County, the arrests continued. One by one, doors opened to the same words. Federal agents, you are under arrest. By 8:10 that morning, the operation was complete. All 19 suspects were in federal custody. For many FBI agents involved in the case, the moment carried a heavy weight. These were not cartel gunmen or street traffickers. They were sworn officers of the law. But the investigation had revealed the truth. For years, these men had protected a $2.9 billion drug pipeline that flooded American communities with cocaine and fentanyl. Now, the badges that once shielded them could no longer protect them. The largest police corruption scandal in Florida's history had just been exposed. The arrest sent shockwaves through Miami and across the United States. Within hours, national news outlets were reporting that a sheriff and 18 police officers had been taken into federal custody for working with a powerful drug cartel. For the people of Miami-Dade County, the news was almost impossible to believe. The men who had sworn to protect the public were now accused of helping move tons of cocaine and fentanyl into American communities. Federal prosecutors quickly announced a long list of charges. The suspects faced accusations that included drug trafficking conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and murder conspiracy connected to the deaths of cooperating witnesses. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Investigators presented the leather ledger showing years of monthly cartel payments. Financial records revealed unexplained wealth, including luxury homes, offshore accounts, and cash deposits that far exceeded the officers' salaries. Encrypted phones recovered during the raids contained hundreds of messages warning cartel members about upcoming police operations. But perhaps the most damaging evidence came from inside the group itself. Out of the 18 officers, 13 quickly agreed to plead guilty and cooperate with federal prosecutors. Facing the possibility of life in prison, they began describing in detail how the corruption network operated. According to their testimony, cartel recruiters first approached a small number of officers with modest payments, sometimes $10,000 or $20,000 for a simple warning about police patrols. Over time, the payments grew larger. Eventually, some officers were receiving over $100,000 a month in exchange for protecting cartel shipments. Their role was simple but devastating. They warned traffickers about drug raids. They redirected patrol units away from cartel vehicles. They removed or destroyed key evidence in major investigations. In several cases, officers even provided addresses of cooperating witnesses to cartel members. Those leaks were linked to the murders of 6 witnesses who had agreed to testify against traffickers. By the time the investigation was complete, federal agents concluded that the cartel had spent hundreds of millions of dollars buying protection inside Miami law enforcement. That protection allowed a massive drug pipeline to grow. Investigators estimated the network had moved billions of dollars in cocaine and fentanyl through South Florida. The total value of the trafficking operation was believed to exceed $2.9 billion. In early autumn, the main trial began in federal court. The courtroom was packed with reporters, investigators, and families of the murdered witnesses. Over several weeks, prosecutors presented financial records, surveillance footage, recorded phone calls, and the cartel ledger recovered from the hidden room in the mansion. When the jury finally began deliberating, they needed only 6 hours to reach a decision. Sheriff Daniel Vargas was found guilty on every major count. At sentencing, the federal judge delivered a message that echoed throughout the courtroom. Vargas received multiple life sentences in federal prison, ensuring he would never again walk free. Several of the remaining officers received sentences ranging from 40 years to life behind bars. For Miami-Dade County, the scandal forced deep changes inside local law enforcement. Independent federal oversight was introduced. New anti-corruption units were created, and strict financial disclosure rules were implemented for officers. But perhaps the most immediate impact was on the cartel itself. Without the protection of corrupt police, federal agents launched a new wave of operations across South Florida. Over the next 6 months, investigators seized more than 20 tons of narcotics and hundreds of millions of dollars in cartel money. The trafficking network that had once operated freely across Miami began to collapse. What started as a routine raid on a mansion had uncovered something far larger than anyone expected: a hidden room, a ledger of payments, and a betrayal that had allowed billions of dollars in drugs to flow into America. In the end, it exposed one of the largest law enforcement corruption scandals in Florida history and proved that even the most deeply hidden crimes eventually come to light. The network was gone. The arrests were complete. The trials were over. The sentences had been handed down. On paper, justice had been served. But in Miami-Dade County, something far more valuable had been damaged: trust. For years, people believed in a simple idea: that the badge stood for protection, that when danger came, the system would stand between them and harm. That law enforcement, no matter how imperfect, was still a line that criminals could not cross. This case proved something far more unsettling. That line can be moved, and sometimes it can disappear entirely. The 6 murdered witnesses were not criminals. They were ordinary people who chose to do the right thing. They stepped forward, spoke to investigators, and trusted the system to protect them. It didn't. One file told the story clearly. A man provided detailed information about cartel routes and safe houses. 2 weeks later, his address was leaked. Within days, he was dead. Not because he made a mistake, but because someone he trusted made a choice. And that is the real lesson of this case. Corruption does not begin with violence. It begins with small decisions: a warning given, a report ignored, a payment accepted just this once. Over time, those small choices grow. They build, they connect, until one day an entire system is no longer protecting the public. It is protecting the crime. The officers involved were not born criminals. They became part of something larger because they chose convenience over integrity, money over duty, silence over truth. And that is what makes this story so dangerous, because it means this can happen anywhere. But there is another side to that truth. If corruption grows through small choices, then so does integrity. Every honest officer who refused a payment, every investigator who kept digging, every witness who still chose to speak, those choices matter just as much. In the end, this case is not only about a $2.9 billion drug network, it is about the fragile line between right and wrong and how easily it can shift. The system was broken, but it was also exposed, and exposure is where change begins. So the question is no longer just what happened in Miami. The real question is, what would you do if you were on the inside? Type justice if you believe integrity still matters. Or type truth if you believe the system must be watched, questioned, and held accountable.